What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and it's finally that time of year again. After a season filled with injuries, mysteries, and conversations about where certain awards are going even when they had clear winners, the postseason starts in just a couple of days. Maybe your favorite team broke a decade-long drought and made the cut. Maybe your team continued to suck and you're wondering if it's finally time to jump ship. Regardless of which side you fall on, you should be excited because these playoffs aren't as cut and dry as they were last season. So just like last year, I'm going to do my best to predict how each series is going to play out. To the best of my memory, I actually made some pretty good calls, and despite being called a Warriors dick rider for my prediction of a gentleman sweep in the finals, I nailed that one, so with any luck I'll get that this year as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and discuss how the Wild Wild West is going to shake out. Man, how unfortunate could the Wolves be, right? They spent most of the season as one of the West's top teams, then coming towards the end, Jimmy Butler went down with a torn meniscus, and just by the hair on their chin with him returning to the lineup, they snapped their 13-year-long playoff drought. That's amazing and I'm happy for them, but their problem is that they're an 8 seed that really should have been closer to like 5 or 4. Yeah, a really bad year for that to happen because with that low ranking, they're going to be taking on one of the best offensive teams in NBA history with the Houston Rockets. What's even worse is that the Wolves don't have any history beating the Rockets this year. They were swept in the season series, and Jimmy Butler actually got hurt in the middle of one of the games while missing the other. I really like how the Wolves look this year with the addition of Jimmy, and there's no doubt in my mind that under better circumstances, they would have placed a lot higher in the West, but I think they're about to run into the same exact problem that Cleveland had against the Golden State Warriors in last year's finals. Sure, between Jimmy, Cat, and Wiggins, they can generate plenty of offense, but it's simply going to take more than that to scare a Houston team that puts up 110 plus points in their sleep, while also being a top defensive team. Meanwhile, like most teams, the Wolves are going to struggle to slow them down, especially considering that they have one of the lowest defensive ratings in the league right now. On paper, this definitely looks like a fun series, but I don't think Houston is going to take any more than 5 games to send them home. Talent-wise, I would say the Wolves could push it to 6, but with the style of ball Houston has played this season, it shouldn't take them any more than 5 games. This is the rematch of last year's Western Conference Finals that everybody wanted, and we're gonna get it in the first round. Man, did the basketball gods bless us or what? Oh wait, this is like the light version of what this series is actually supposed to be. Yeah, for like the 4th straight season that we've all waited for the day that the 2 top teams of the West would clash, we again are ending up with a fraction of the series that should have been. Seriously, ever since the Warriors popped up in like 2015, all I've ever wanted is to see them face the Spurs while being healthy, but at this point I'm just convinced it's not meant to be. This time around, the Spurs placed 7th because Kawhi has been MIA for the entire season, and the Warriors placed 2nd because the injury bug has hit them from every angle. Coming into this series, the assumption is that there will be no Curry and no Kawhi, so it's a bit more competitive than what happened last year, I guess. During this season, the Warriors have won that series 3-1, but the key players were missing from every game, so I don't think that holds a ton of weight here. This is of course a rare case because the Spurs are a lot better than your average team that's been missing their star player all season, but still it breaks down like this. Golden State has no excuse to lose this series. Even without Curry, Kevin Durant, Clay, and Dre are a lot for any team to handle. The Spurs are fundamentally sound as usual, but they're not going to have the firepower to pull off any kind of upset here. The only thing that would change my mind about this would be Kawhi Leonard teleporting back from whatever dimension he's currently hiding out in. I gave it some thought, and technically this would be a really good chance for the Spurs to really throw a wrench in everybody's playoff plans. If the Warriors are gone, the championship is wide open for a lot of teams, and they're at their most vulnerable point right now without Steph. Still, I kind of doubt that Kawhi would just hop straight back into NBA basketball during the playoffs, and if he did, who knows what type of shape he'd be in, right? So at the time of this writing, I'm picking the Curryless Warriors over the Kawhi-less Spurs in 5 games. I don't expect that the Warriors' sluggish play at the end of this season is going to translate into the playoffs, so I don't see an upset happening here. Westbrook just got done averaging a triple-double for the 2nd straight season, and although a couple of years ago that looked impossible, sadly nobody cares anymore. He's been reduced to being called a stat patter, and with the way the Thunder underperformed this season, he's going to be judged solely by how far he can lead OKC in the playoffs. To start off with that, they'll be hosting the Utah Jazz in what shouldn't be any more than a tune-up series, and I'm going to explain why I feel that way. First off, all my respects to the Jazz. To the best of my memory, I didn't even mention their name during my season prediction video back in like August or September, and that's mainly because I had no clue how good Donovan Mitchell was going to be. Many props to that kid for leading what many thought was going to be a bottom seed to the playoffs in this wild Western Conference. With that being said, they could have had better luck than ending up with the Thunder in the first round of the playoffs. Look, have the Thunder been inconsistent and frustrating all season long? Absolutely. But if you follow my Twitter, you know that I've been saying for a while now, I believe this team is literally built for the playoffs. They're a top 10 defense and they have 3 or 2.5 stars depending on how you look at it. Regardless of what you think, I bet if you asked any of the opposing players, they prefer not to have to guard George, Westbrook, and Melo in a playoff series while dealing with Steven Adams down low. To me, their roster has always screamed matchup problems for any team in the playoffs, and that's not going to go over well for a Jazz team that nobody even thought would be in the playoffs. During the season, the Thunder took the series 3-1, but there's interesting details here. First off, Gobert missed 2 games. The Jazz won one that he played in, and the other was close. The 2 he didn't play in were blowouts. Despite NBA Twitter telling you that Mitchell has done absolutely everything for the Jazz, they're actually worse at almost everything without Gobert on the floor, and that's natural because he's a strong Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Even with that, the Jazz are young, and I think a series against the Thunder is biting off a little bit more than they can actually chew. They basically have the exact problem the Wolves are going to have with the Rockets. The Jazz are an amazing defensive team which doesn't get enough attention in the league, but they're extremely average in offense as you'd expect. The team that knocks off the Thunder is going to need to be sufficient in both of those categories, and in any case, I just don't think they have good matchups for Westbrook and George, and Melo if his play trends upward during the postseason. I'm calling the Thunder in 5 here. And we've reached the last series in the West, and I saved it for last because I think it's going to be the most interesting, or at least the most competitive. Whereas the other series seemed to have some clear winners without digging that deep, this series could truly swing either way. Here you have 2 teams that I think shocked a lot of people. I don't know how many people called the Blazers a 3rd seed at the beginning of the season, but I wasn't one of them, and the Pelicans ended up with a nice spot despite losing DeMarcus Cousins, who was absolutely eating before that Achilles injury. Davis really turned into an MVP candidate after he went down, but many people have ignored that his supporting cast stepped up as well. Nikola Mirotic was a good pickup, Drew Holiday has been doing what was expected of him, and even Rondo is almost back to averaging a double-double. I don't have to lie to you, New Orleans was dead to me when Cousins went down, so props to them for putting this run together. Props to Damian Lillard as well. I know he feels he's one of the most underrated point guards in the league, and when you consider what everyone thought of this team when the roster disbanded in 2015, he deserves a ton of credit. So in this battle of underdogs, who's moving on to get beat by the Warriors in the second round? Well, they split the series 2-2. The only games that the Pelicans won featured DeMarcus Cousins, and one of those actually didn't have Anthony Davis in it. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is one of the most difficult series for me to call because neither of them have runaway advantages over the other, but here's what makes a difference to me. Anthony Davis once had a partner in crime that would have definitely tipped this series in their favor. When Davis said he believed he and Cousins could have made a run in the West, he was absolutely right. However, in this playoff basketball, a lot of responsibility is about to fall on his shoulders to pull them past a better team, but I think the duo of CJ and Lillard combined with their defense is going to give them the edge on New Orleans. My call here is the Blazers in 7. This puts us in the second round where, thank you basketball gods, the Rockets are gonna play the Thunder, and the Warriors will again destroy the Blazers. Let's just go ahead and do the easy one first. I don't mean any disrespect to Lillard and the Blazers, but this is just kind of the nature of where we're at with competition in the NBA. From what we've heard, Curry will likely be back by the time this series takes place. CJ and Lillard are a great duo and they're a tough matchup for other teams, but they just do not match up well with the Golden State Warriors. Well, actually, there's really nobody that matches up great with the healthy Warriors, right? Anyways, with Curry back in the lineup, even if he's not 100%, just him being out there to space the floor next to his all-time great shooters is going to give them more than enough to send Damian Lillard and the Blazers packing for the 3rd year in a row. Again, write this down, I'm assuming Curry is going to be back. If that's true, the Warriors are going to take this one in another sweep. The Blazers are simply going to need more firepower besides Lillard and CJ to match what the Warriors can do. And now onto a series I was just praying for a week ago. To make the playoffs, the Thunder had to go through Houston, and it was one of the best games of the year. Albeit, we did get reminded at the end of the game that both Eric Gordon and Ryan Anderson were sitting out, but nonetheless, I have been looking forward to seeing the NBA's last 2 MVPs duke it out with sufficient supporting cast. Yes, Harden is this year's MVP. So how's it going to look this time? Westbrook actually led his team to a great fight against the Rockets last year, but at the end of the day, there was only so much he could do with a team that had no spacing versus a team that had all the spacing in the world. 1 year later, Harden has Chris Paul, Westbrook has PG and Melo, which on paper looks about even. Of course, the Rockets ended up being a better team with a better system, but again, playoff basketball is going to be a lot different and more competitive. The Thunder took the series 2-1, however, it's worth noting that Chris Paul sat out in one of those losses, and that's a huge deal considering the Rockets barely lost when he played. The other important thing here is that Andre Roberson only got to play in one game that series, obviously worth mentioning since they won without relying on his much needed defense. Speaking of that, it's a good place to start. When the Thunder had Roberson, I was convinced they could shock everyone and go all the way. Sure, they were streaky, but in the playoffs where the object was to be the first team to 16 wins, I was fully on board with the idea that a team that had 3 stars and a top 5 defense could beat anybody in 4 games. He may not have provided much on the offensive side, but having Roberson on the floor with George was going to be a nightmare for a team like Houston that did a majority of the damage from the perimeter. I'm gonna say that with him, I would have chosen the Thunder to upset the Rockets and move on to the Western Conference Finals. However, there was one time I watched the Rockets and Thunder play without Roberson, and all the Rockets had to do was involve Carmelo's man in a pick and roll action. When they got the switch, he stood no chance staying in front of Harden, and it was what Shaq likes to call barbecue chicken. I'd have to imagine that the Rockets are gonna rely on something like that in the playoffs, and without the help of Roberson, I'm choosing the more well-oiled machine to win this series in 7 games. I do want to say, however, that this might be my favorite series in the playoffs should it actually happen. Westbrook gives 110% every night, and I'm completely betting on the Thunder being a better playoff team than they were in the regular season. Seeing him have helped to face off against Harden with a contending roster, this will really be a dream come true if it works out that way. Also, just a side note before I move on, I wonder if Luc Mbah a Moute is going to make it in time for this playoff series. It flew under the radar that night because the Lakers' new rookie, who by the way is like 50 years older than Ben Simmons, he took the spotlight, but yeah, Luc did actually dislocate his shoulder. He was a pretty good 3-and-D guy for the Rockets, and his absence certainly means something. The good news is that so far he's only predicted to miss the first round, but if that goes so quickly, is he going to be back in time for this one? I'm not saying he's the complete difference maker, but as you can tell, I think this series is going to be close and every role player counts in games like that. And now we move on to what I assume, like most years, is going to be the real NBA Finals. The Rockets and Warriors are a series that everyone has been anticipating since it became clear that Chris Paul had turned them into something special. I used to say that to challenge the Warriors, you either had to A, be the healthy San Antonio Spurs, or B, match their star power somehow. It's the main reason I pegged them to be a long-lasting dynasty, because I just didn't see many opportunities to duplicate what they put together. However, it turns out having 2 superstar point guards, one of which is a natural shooting guard anyways, really makes your team explosive. My biggest question was how Paul and Harden would coexist, and it turned out to be a not so difficult thing. Imagine Chris Paul running his own teams back in the day, and imagine the Harden that has been running Houston. Now join them while Harden moves to the 2. When you think about it, it's really not that hard to see why this team was flirting with 70 wins. And in any regular year, this wouldn't even be a conversation. Houston barely lost with CP, Harden, and Capella on the floor. They're a top offense in history, and they're a top 10 defensive team. Championship favorites, right? Well, you already know where this is headed, but before that, I just want to say that Houston found the next best thing to compete with Golden State. See, last year, Cleveland clearly had the offensive firepower to hang with the Warriors, it's just that we had legitimate questions if they ever gave defense any attention in practice. Without being star-studded, the Rockets have struck that territory of necessary offense and defense to give the Warriors serious problems, and when you consider the fact that their bench didn't exactly turn out the way we thought it would, this is going to be a fun series. The Rockets took the season series 2-1, but honestly, it's not a great assessment of what the series might be like. In the first game, the Rockets didn't have Paul, and Draymond Green got hurt in the middle of it. And in the one the Warriors took, James Harden wasn't playing, so you can basically go ahead and throw those results to the wind. However, in the one game where everybody was healthy, the Rockets edged them out, and it made a lot of people wonder what this playoff series would hold. An important note from that game, the Warriors lost mainly because Steph and Klay had terrible shooting nights. I only bring this up because I'm wondering what effects injuries may have on Curry. In the series that's going to take place prior to this one, they're really not going to need Curry to be trailblazing because those teams don't have the firepower regardless. However, the back of every Houston jersey should say firepower on it, and if Curry isn't out there giving it right back to them, as in he has another series like he did in the 2016 finals, the Rockets might see a bit of daylight. So where does all of this leave my playoff prediction? Yeah, I'm sorry, the Warriors are going straight back to their 4th straight NBA finals. Look, I've said it a million times, these just aren't ordinary days in the NBA. Yes, the Rockets are a top offense in history, but what people have forgotten since all of the injuries this season is that just last year, the Warriors were also a top offense in NBA history. We haven't seen it in a while because they've been injured to hell, but if they're all on the floor together, they still don't have an equal. Houston is still one more star away from being able to actually beat the healthy Warriors in a playoff series. I've heard the rumblings this year that Golden State is going to fall off early, KD is going to join the winning team, all that good stuff, but I think you're all just a tad bit premature. The day very well might come when the Warriors are knocked off, but unless there's some more injuries or Curry can't come back for whatever reason, they're still the clear favorites in any playoff series. I think the thing you've all got to remember is that Golden State is not an ordinary team. Ordinary teams get thrown off when a star misses so much time, or they lose a ton of games in a season, or they don't have home court advantage. The Warriors, however, when they're all healthy, remain the most stacked team we've ever seen on paper. Their floor is still spread further than anyone you can name in all the years the NBA has ever been around. The Rockets are going to put up a great fight, and I think they're going to get 2 games off of the Warriors, but reality is going to hit a lot of you in the back of the head when the Warriors are whole again, as they give themselves a chance for their 3rd championship in 4 years, and I'm pretty sure that's officially going to make them a dynasty. So all in all, the Western Conference is kind of strange. Despite it clearly being more exciting than what happened last season, I'm not expecting too many things out of the ordinary, and as you saw at the beginning, I'm expecting some quick series. Because of Kawhi's absence and Jimmy Butler's late injury and return, there's a couple of series that probably shouldn't have happened until later that are going to be going right from the start. In particular, I think the Warriors lucked out again because they've got a pretty light path on the way to the Western Conference Finals, and I would have really preferred them to be playing the Wolves in the 2nd round, meanwhile having a team like the Pelicans or Jazz play the Rockets in the 1st. But as I said when I made my prediction video back in August or September, I wasn't even trying to call seeds because I remember specifically saying that injuries could change this whole thing, and man, I guess I jinxed it, didn't I? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. The Eastern Conference predictions is going to be following this video really quickly, so be out on the lookout for that. Make sure to leave your predictions in the comment section and tell me all about what I'm right about or what I'm wrong about, or just whatever you think, leave it down there. Hit the like button, comment and sub if you enjoyed, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.